Good afternoon, everybody. How are you all doing on this lovely rainy afternoon in Fernandina Beach? Did you get out and about before the rain hit? Hopefully a little bit, or you braved it because you were properly prepared and brought a rain jacket, right? Yes, that sounds great. Well, once again, we are going to do my presentation, but we are not going to be in the city where we need to be. Cape Canaveral is what I'm going to be talking about today, and in particular the space program, the space race for the United States, and how well we have done. We are actually up here in Amelia Island, but bear with me. Tomorrow, some of you will be going to visit the Kennedy Space Center, as well as visiting other parts of Cape Canaveral. I definitely encourage you, if you haven't signed up yet, go view it, go see the area. That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. I'm really excited to talk about this because this is something that's very near and dear to my heart. Growing up in Orlando, Florida, I have plenty of stories of watching the shuttles launch, of going out and watching rockets launch. And I will let you know that when we get a little further into this story and I tell you some of the more emotional parts of the space program, you may see me get a little bit more emotional, just as a heads up. It is something that I have seen in person, some of the shuttle launches that did not go correct, but we're going to talk about it today. So, buckle up, get ready to talk about the beautiful Cape Canaveral area in Florida. All right, so let's start off talking a little bit about why Cape Canaveral. I know you all have heard of the space program before. You've heard of space launches. They've said things like, Houston, are you there? Can you hear me? So why Cape Canaveral and Florida in particular? Well, let's break that down a little bit. One of the things that's the most important when they think about Cape Canaveral is thinking about the area surrounding it. Launching east out of Cape Canaveral is a lot easier. It's going to help us be able to work with the Earth's rotation, so very scientific here. It's going to allow for some extra speed for that trajectory as we launch out of the atmosphere. It's going to allow for a very safe buffer. One of the things that was a big concern for NASA was what happens if there's a disaster or something happens midair? Where is the shuttle going to land? And when you have the Atlantic Ocean, you have a pretty decent place for it to land for a period of time. At least it's not landing on top of actual land, people's houses, somewhere where somebody lives. So from a technical perspective, Cape Canaveral really made a lot of sense. The Earth's rotation is going to help us with this, and it's also going to make us be able to have that clear launch area. You know from watching launches that there's always going to be a timetable. They're going to watch the weather, they're going to watch the area around it. They want to make sure that you can actually launch into space. And Cape Canaveral provided all of this. At the time that it was being built, it was pretty sparsely populated, as well as being kind of in that middle zone. We've talked a lot about how Florida has grown through history. We've talked a lot how it was considered the Wild West in some respects, right? Wild Florida, I've said a couple times. And so part of this is going to allow for the productivity of a space industry that is not going to be inhibited by things around it, right? So Cape Canaveral is going to become America's launch point, not just for spacecraft. It's going to be part of that American identity. We're going to look to Cape Canaveral, we're going to look to the Kennedy Space Center, and we're going to look to these areas to see how we can get into space, how we can get to the moon, right? So we are really focused on the Cape Canaveral area. But let me back up a little bit more. I'm sure you're used to this by now with me bringing us back a couple thousand years and really talking about the landscape. If you were here yesterday for my talk, or I talked about Amelia Island as a barrier island, you know that a barrier island is a long stretch of land that's between a mainland, and it's going to be a protection. It's going to be able to stop the hurricanes on some level, stop some of the wind, stop some of that salty rain from coming through. It's going to absorb that impact to help prevent these storms from coming in. And so one of the things I like to say is that this area the Barrier Island area actually sprung into a launch pad. And so you can see here, Cape Canaveral, Kennedy Space Center is all part of that larger Barrier Island infrastructure. This area in the beginning was very small, like I told you. Fishing communities, reminiscent of the Timucua tribe in this area, those shell people that you see. Small settlements are going to be in this place as well. This is going to be a stop along Flagler's Railroad as he comes south, but it's not going to be as big until a little bit later on when the space race truly starts. It's going to be filled with farming, filled with ranching, filled with fishing. It's not going to be until about World War II when the U.S. military is going to start to use this area for missile testing and training. So in 1940, the Navy is going to establish the Banana River Naval Air Station. And that's going to start the process of testing, not just for pilot training, but also for missile launches and anti-submarine patrols. You're going to see a lot of this come out of this area here. By the 1950s, you're going to see the Cold War escalations are going to become much more tense here, especially after World War II. After World War II, one of the things we were able to take from Germany was that rocket knowledge, that rocket technology. We were able to work with the engineers and the scientists who developed some of those really early missile systems, and we're going to take over that and we're going to start to improve upon our own knowledge, and we're going to use that here in Cape Canaveral to start to build different missile systems. In 1949, we're going to be selected as the missile testing site for the Joint Long Range Proving Grounds, and this is going to be another step forward for the Cape Canaveral area in particular, and for Florida to join eventually the space race. So right now, it's pretty militarized in this context, right? We're testing weapons, not necessarily nuclear weapons, but we are going out, we're having pilot trainings, we're having testings. It's a lot easier, like I said, to do testings over the ocean where somebody can land in water and we can grab them from the water and them destroying some part of land. And so you're going to see this expansion happen pretty rapidly. And that shift is going to be pretty dramatic for the people who live here. I do have a slide where we go a little bit more into detail on Cape Canaveral residents themselves and the general Space Coast. And I'm happy to share my experiences as we go through it as well from growing up in the Space Coast area since my birth. It's a place of necessity, though, that I like to say. Cape Canaveral is so unique. When you go there tomorrow and you go to the Kennedy Space Center and you see what it's truly about, I'm sure you're going to be awestruck. If you have not already been there, I encourage you to try to go. And if you have been there, go back. You never know what astronaut is going to be there to talk to you. They routinely have them there to meet you, greet you. There still is plenty of space program knowledge that we need to gather and we need to have for the future. And so Cape Canaveral, by the 1960s, is going to be full-fledged into that Cold War. So we're going to see a transformation in the Cape Canaveral area. You're going to see a lot of roads that are going to be cut down to make way, or you're going to see a lot of wetlands cut down to make way for roads. This is going to be pretty typical so that they can reach these launch pads. They're going to take down those beautiful palmettos I talked about yesterday, the state tree, in order to make these launch areas. And if you've been following any of the shuttles, we'll get to Artemis 2 a little later, you know that it is a full, long progress. It starts where they have to move a shuttle out of a bay, go along a long, long stretch of road to get to where they need to go. We are literally lighting something on fire to send people to the moon. So let's remember that blast needs to go out a little bit further than just a couple yards, right? And so with that being known, they're going to wheel out these to places very far away. And all of that is infrastructure that needs to be built in the area. So if you can imagine that barrier island I talked about yesterday, that ever-changing, shifting sand, we're going to see a little bit more of a permanent change along the coast of Cape Canaveral as we go forward. All right, so does anybody know what that image is to the right? Sputnik, great job. All right, so Sputnik. So Americans are going to see the image of Sputnik in 1957, and we're going to be completely shocked. The Russians have beat us into space. The Russians are able to orbit around us. They're able to possibly see what we're doing. They're able to possibly penetrate into our space. We are terrified. We see this odd cylindrical object with the weird little spikes out of it, and we have no idea what it is. It is truly an alien object. And so we decide in 1958 that we are going to form NASA as a response. And we do that. And the reason that we form that is because we need to respond to Russia. This is the height of the Cold War right here, right? So we're in the middle of some escalating tensions. If you know the definition of Cold War, we're kind of playing games back and forth. It's not a hot war in terms of us invading at that point. We're doing anything other than presenting ourselves as the more powerful force. Well, right now, when Sputnik entered the atmosphere, we are not the most popular force, and we know it, and we're not happy about it. And so people are going to see from their living rooms for the first time Sputnik going around the atmosphere, and they're obviously going to be alarmed. Here in Cape Canaveral, pretend we're in Cape Canaveral. Here in Cape Canaveral, we're going to absolutely start to think, not just in a panic mode, we're going to erase panic. We're scientists, we're engineers, we're mathematicians, we're smart, we're intelligent. We know we can beat the Russians. And instead of panicking, we're going to up our launch times. We're going to say, you know what? We thought in 2 years we were going to be able to do this. Let's do it in 6 months. We're going to figure out how to get to space. And we know that we need to get there as fast as possible. And so you start to see some of this urgency come out of it. You start to see where we want to be part of the testing. Testing is going to increase. It's going to be loud. It's going to be in people's faces. And it's going to start off with something called Project Mercury. Project Mercury was from 1958 to 1963. And this goal that Project Mercury wanted to accomplish was, can a human survive in space? Can we make it out of our atmosphere safely alive? And can we be in space? That's it. That's step one. Get off of Earth and get into space, right? And so Project Mercury is going to be that fundamental goal. We're not looking at spacewalks yet. We're not going to the moon. Not yet, okay? What we're trying to do is we're trying to have a human spaceflight program. And you're going to see that it starts very, very slowly. And I'll give you some dates a little bit later. But you're going to see that there's going to be more sonic booms in the area. How many of you heard a sonic boom from a shuttle launch? Yeah, I've been woken up from it in the middle of the night, or when they come back, whichever one it is. And you just know, oh, they're back. Or there they go, whichever one it is. And so you're going to hear that more often growing up in Cape Canaveral. You're going to be part of this as you go forward, right? And so they're testing things. They're trying to understand what it is like to go fast. They need to get out of the atmosphere. We're also going to be still continuing with that military strategy, right? So we still have naval bases here. We're going to have some more bases that are going to pop up. And so while we're doing the space program, we're also very focused on the U.S. deterrence strategies. So we want to make sure we keep the Cold War cold. You don't want a hot war here. We want to make sure that our main focus is beating the Russians to space, right? We want to walk on the moon. So the Russians are able to get to space first, and they're also able to get a man into space first. But we're going to win in the end because we get a man to the moon first. I'll keep reminding you of that along the way. So after this, the Kennedy Space Center is going to be built, as well as the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. This is going to be a response to that infrastructure that is needed to create the eventual shuttle program. So right now, as we're starting off, we're thinking very small. Capsules, maybe one person can get to the moon. We're not thinking the 4, 7, 8-person shuttle launches that you all know today, right? So we're still very baby stepped in this one. So how was it like living near the launches? Like I said, I grew up in Orlando, Florida, very familiar with the launches. In fact, my mom and dad did their best in making sure that we were always available to go see these launches unless it was truly 1 a.m. in the morning, which is sometimes happens. It was very common for us to go outside and watch them, or even drive out to Cape Canaveral ourselves. And this was a common thing for all of the space area. I can tell you many stories from growing up where school was stopped. We would pause everything for that day or for that moment. We'd walk outside. The school was all about it. The whole neighborhood was all about it. In fact, the other day when, I'll show you the video, I did put it up here for you all, when Artemis 2 launched, and that was April 1st, so a couple days ago. My husband was driving around, and he still lived in the Melbourne Beach, Canaveral area. And he's driving around, and he's like, I don't know what to do. Like, I can't find parking. And I'm like, I promise you, just park your car, leave the keys in your car. No one's gonna be upset at you. He found a spot at a Publix, ran to the nearest beach, and was able to film the shuttle launch. Very common thing if you're growing up in the Space Coast. Nobody's going to be upset at you for stopping the world to go see humans leave Earth to go to space. Pretty cool stuff there. So it's a pretty common occurrence. Everyone understood it. I mean, again, I remember my school teacher stopping school for us to go outside. It was a common thing. I remember even when I was at work would stop. And if you happen to have not seen Artemis 2, you can even just see the videos of people reacting to Artemis 2 because full softball games stopped to go watch it. Baseball games stopped. We're in the middle of the NCAA March Madness tournament. Those tournaments stopped to see the shuttle launch. It's an important part of history. The last time that we tried to go to the moon was in 1972. But we'll get to that. So just know that living near the launches was part of the atmosphere. This is a pretty typical view of the beach, right? You have the dunes, you have the grasses, the Florida grasses. These are all protected areas. And these are beautiful areas where you can go along the East Coast on any of the coastlines between Cape Titusville all the way down to Melbourne Beach and further. And you can see the shuttle launches there. These are also very typical pictures of it. So this is a rocket launch as opposed to a shuttle launch, whereas this is the shuttle. And we'll get a little bit more into the differences between the rockets and the shuttles. But as you can imagine, these shuttles they're high-powered rockets being shot into from Earth. And so this daily routine becomes part of our daily routine. It became normal to look up and go, when are they rolling out the shuttle? It takes 18 hours to roll it out, by the way. When are they going to be ready for the shuttle? When should I look for the shuttle? When should I look for the rocket launch? How do I get an update for it? This is all becomes actually part of normal conversations with friends where you text each other and go, or you call each other and say, hey, are you going to be watching the shuttle launch? Families of the Space Coast are very important, not just because they grew up and they lived in it just like me, but because we were part of that society. Both of my parents are engineers, and one of them is a mechanical engineer and another one's an electrical engineer. And so they come from very different backgrounds, and they could tell me a little bit about what was going on some level, right? They're not aerospace engineers, they didn't work for NASA. But there's plenty of people that work for other companies along the way that understand what it is to be behind that propulsion, to behind that power of being able to launch something into space. So you start to see these families be part of this. Technicians, janitors, security staffs, thousands of people are working on the ground to help these 4 to 8 people that are being launched into space. It's not just a couple people that are going to get those accolades. It's the entire neighborhood. It's all of the families. We talked a bit at the very beginning, when we talked about the Cuban Missile Crisis and how families came together, how the military families came together. They were scared. They didn't know what was going to happen to their loved ones, right? And in a similar sense, you're not sure as well, right? Something bad could happen. Again, we're talking about massive armaments being shot underneath a shuttle so that you can go into space. It could be pretty dangerous stuff. Yet they still continue to keep that tight-knit bond. And you would see that through the entirety of the space race. If I could say one thing, it's that the space race has brought us together, not just as Americans, but as humans. We have realized our full potential as we start to launch off of this Earth, and you start to realize how connected we are all together. These neighborhoods are going to definitely do those. Again, I remember one of my fondest memories is the picnic table in my backyard, where my mom would say, the shuttle's going to launch in a couple minutes. Let's go outside and look at the shuttle. We're going to sit at the picnic table and we're going to look up. We got to look this way or this way, whichever way they decided to launch. And it was all part of the fun. Sometimes she would even come to school with us and for that moment and sit there with us because the school would stop. They would stop teaching and bring us outside. Or maybe we would, at work, we would call each other and make sure that we could see what was going on with it. It was something that brought us together. I also know that as part of the space community, one of the things that they tried to instill in you is that knowledge. They wanted you to be a future astronaut growing up. They wanted you to be part of the community. Every year I visited the Kennedy Space Center. I loved it. And every year I tried to get into space camp and couldn't get in. But that's another story. There's one in Alabama that you can go to. It's really cool. But we would always go to their demonstrations and I'd get strapped in one of their gear things and get rotated around and see if I could survive, not pass out with 2Gs or whatever they were trying to do. Or go in the little bouncy thing and figure out what it's like to be in zero gravity or weigh yourself and see what it's like to be on the moon. All of these are part of the exciting part. And the Space Coast absolutely thrived on it. They wanted you to be part of the adventure. They wanted you to understand it. Math, science, history, these were important topics in schools besides reading, writing, and being part of the social life, right? So you're going to see a lot of that mixed in there, that pride mixed with quiet fears, because we all know that these are high propulsions. This is dangerous stuff behind it, right? I mean, it's one step away from a missile as opposed to a shuttle. Some of the dates that I want to give you before we go on, just to put them in your mind. So 1958, like I said, NASA is created. It's going to transform the Cape Canaveral landscape, not from a military site, into the civilian space program. It's going to be a quick change, but it's going to be a great change. It's going to encompass the entirety of the Space Coast area, and it's going to grab all the residents in and tell them, you're part of our community. Let's figure out how to get to the moon. In 1961, Alan Shepard is going to be the first American in space. He's going to launch from Cape Canaveral, and his flight's just going to be 15 minutes. Even though we weren't the first man in space, we are going to be the first people on the moon. And that is going to happen in 1962. First, John Glenn's going to orbit in 1962, and then in 1969, Apollo 11 is going to launch. And we're going to have Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins becoming those global figures that help us understand what it's truly like to be humans on Earth. They're going to look back and see the Earth. They're going to comment on it. They're going to say the famous lines, one step for man, one giant leap for humanity. It's going to be absolutely beautiful. But these aren't just national heroes. They are national heroes to us. I mean, how amazing is it that we were able to go to a planet, a distant moon of ours, and actually walk on it? That's pretty cool. It's going to take thousands of engineers and technicians on the ground to get them there. It's going to take many, many women who are going to keep a household in check as they watch their husbands fly to the moon while caring for their families, right? This is going to be something very difficult, especially for those women at home to deal with, because constant media attention is going to be put on them. They're going to constantly be asked for interviews while possibly they have no communication from the spaceship orbiting, while they don't know any information, while NASA remains silent. And some of that is because of safety reasons. Apollo 13 was on recently. You should watch it again. It's stunning to watch again. But we'll get to Apollo 13 in a little bit. So a lot of these women are going to make sure that they not only keep their families together while their husbands or their spouses or their family members are in space, but they're going to encourage their children to seek a future in the space industry. Wow, look at your dad, look at your brother, look at your uncle, look at your grandpa. How cool is that? Don't you want to do that as well? Don't you want to go to the moon? Don't you want to keep propelling America forward into the new technology? And it's going to encourage this space race to continue further and further on. It's going to give them a lot of recognition. All right, I'm going to pause here and let you know that I do not have any negative images up there, but we're going to talk about something a little rough. and that's going to be the disasters that happen with the space industry. On January 18, 1986, we all watched as a Challenger launched from Cape Canaveral. Among them were 7 astronauts. Dick Scobie, who was the commander, Michael Smith, the pilot, Ronald McNair, Ellison Onizuka, Judith Resnick, Gregory Jarvis, and Krista McAuliffe. Krista McAuliffe was a teacher. She was 37 years old. She had 2 children. She was chosen among 11,000 people for a new program called Teachers in Space. My kindergarten teacher knew her, talked about her a lot. My kindergarten teacher was instrumental in making sure I knew about the space race, making sure I knew the history of space, making sure I remembered Krista. She's in this picture here. 73 seconds after launch, there's going to be a failure on the primary and the secondary O-rings, and the spaceship is going to be destroyed. And people are going to see this in real time. This is very upsetting for many people. This is hard. This is a tragedy, an American tragedy, a human tragedy. These people represented America for us. They represented what it was to explore. At the end of the day, our American identity, I am sure of it from researching, is exploration, is learning more from other people, is knowledge, is continually expanding out, being part of the community around us. And that's all they were trying to do. One of her famous quotes is, "I love to touch the future, and that's why I teach." And I want us to keep remembering her, because even though it's such a hard thing to know, she still propelled us forward. I still think of her every day. And I know my kindergarten teacher still thinks of her every day. I know I think of all of them. They're important people in this world, and we should remember their names. Years later, in February 2003, we're going to have another loss, and this is going to be the Columbia. And this one I actually was alive for, and I actually saw in person. I was pretty young. My mom brought me out Lake Carmel, had us sit at that picnic table to watch the shuttle. Realized what happened. They were 16 minutes away from landing. They were very close. And she brought us inside very quickly. I gotta say, when I looked at the pictures for this, they were pretty upsetting, and I did not put them on here for it, because there is pictures, there is images, there is videos of the shuttle exploding. Rick Husband was the commander on board. William McCool was the pilot. Michael Anderson, Kalpana Chula, she was the first Indian woman in space. David Brown, Laurel Clark, Ilan Rahman, the first Israeli in space. There was a piece of insulation foam that broke during their launch. It created a hole. Basically, their reinforced carbon-carbon heat shield panels failed. So when they came in, they landed, it was a combustion. The space shuttle was destroyed. But again, we continued forward. We persevered. On April 1st, Artemis 2 launched. Remember that. We're going back to space, y'all. We're going back to the moon. But these stories are stories not just of hardship. These are stories of tragedy, but of triumph. We learned from them. Some of the things we learned was we were complacent. Complacency is the killer of all things. Don't be complacent. Constantly check yourself. Constantly check yourself. Complacency was what led to some of this. And some of this was just purely accidental, right? We're humans, right? Tragedies happen, and we learn from them. It is our goal, and it is our responsibility to not let their dust be in vain. We need to continue forward with the space program. We need to continue forward with this education, making sure that we move forward, making sure that we're continually trying to do what we need to do. I'm sure you all know the stories of Apollo 1, so 1967. That one is going to be where the cabin caught on fire and killed 3 astronauts who didn't even make it off the ground. It's going to be Gus Grissom Ed White, and Roger Chaffee. We're also going to have Apollo 13, right? Now this one, however, is going to be one of those instances where we were able to pull it together. We saw an issue, something happened in Apollo 13, and they knew it while they were in space, and they were able to fix it to get back to Earth. That's amazing. Okay, that's amazing. When I was watching the movie, they were talking about how the way that they needed to enter the Earth, and I don't have what they had. They had a basketball and a baseball, but they needed to enter the atmosphere with pretty much this much chance. Like that's exactly how they needed to enter the atmosphere. And I am not a scientist, but it is very important to know that the reason they scrub launches is because they're not able to exit the atmosphere. There's something in the way, something's gonna happen, right? Like I said, the whole reason we're launching from Cape Canaveral is because we're trying to go with the Earth's rotation. We're trying to launch as fast as possible. We're trying to use the Earth's speed to get us out of the atmosphere. Well, if the atmosphere is the problem, right? If something's in the way, we're gonna scrub the launch, which means we're gonna stop it. But we can't scrub something that's coming back to Earth. We gotta help them, right? And that's what we did for Apollo 13. Pretty cool stuff, I would say. Let me talk a little bit about some of the different programs that we had. So again, to reinforce our victory, let me tell you this. Sure, Russia was able to launch Sputnik. Russia was able to have the first human in space, but we made it to the moon. Our footprints are on the moon. We win, okay? Just leave it at that. All right, so how did the space program start? So we're gonna start with Mercury. Mercury is gonna begin in the late 1950s. Mercury had a very simple goal. Can a human survive in space, right? Can a human survive in space? It's going to be a short and experimental launch. It's going to be a rocket, right? So we're not going to get to this really cool shuttle that you see here yet. We'll get there. So we're going to launch people in a huge combustible rocket into space later. Right here, though, we're trying to make sure that people can go into space. The next one is going to be Project Gemini. So we're going to evolve a little bit more. And this one, we're going to ask ourselves, could humans live in space? Not just go to space. Can we now function in space? Have any of you ever heard an astronaut, have you ever heard an interview from an astronaut about what it's like to be in space? Yeah. So if you haven't, imagine that you're in zero gravity, which is hard to do. Imagine you're in a pool. You're just floating around. But now imagine that you don't have any of that around you. How can you digest your food? How can you eat? How can you do normal, functional human things that gravity helped you with, right? Gravity keeps us on Earth. Gravity keeps me standing upright. Gravity allows me to do the things that I'm supposed to do. If I have no gravity anymore, what am I doing? And so that is what Project Gemini is going to try to answer. Okay, now we're in space. Cool, great. We went in space. Can we live in space? Can we figure out what it's like to be in space, or are we, what are we doing, right? And so in 1961, President JFK is going to declare the U.S. is going to land on the moon by the end of the decade. And that is going to be one of the major undertakings of Project Gemini. There's going to be 12 flights, including Gemini 4, which is going to include a spacewalk. Astronaut Ed White is going to do the very first spacewalk. This is pretty cool. So now we're in space, and now we're out of our spaceship doing a spacewalk. Can you imagine that first time that you stepped out of it and you're just looking at nothing? It's not an ocean, right? I think it sounds very fascinating. Then you're going to have Phase 7. So Phase 7 is going to be the 1962 to 63 space. This is where we're going to try to test how long we can be in space. You're going to have Gordon Cooper. He's going to go into space for 34 hours. Pretty cool at that time. That's a long time. That's over a day. Well, a day relative to Earth. And that's good. That he can understand what it's like to go through a full day. He can understand what it's like to the effects on you, right? I mean, on Earth, we've had a lot of studies about what it's like to have darkness all the time, too much cold, too much heat. Think about that when it comes to space. Now you're in space. right? You have no oxygen, you have no air. Sound can't travel, right? All sorts of creepy things. You don't know how far things are away from you. And this is going to lead to Project Apollo. So Project Apollo is going to be totally different. This goal, led by President JFK, is going to be, we are going to the moon. Cool. We went to space. We can live in space for at least 34 hours. Now we're going to go to the moon. We're going to make our imprint on the moon. And we're going to get there, right? Apollo 8 is going to be the first launch where humans are going to leave Earth's orbit. And we're going to leave it in one of these really cool shuttles. These shuttles are multi-layered. They have different boosters that are going to fall back to Earth. Very important, remember, because I told you we are now over the Atlantic Ocean. So at least those boosters aren't going to fall on human populations, right? They're going to fall in the ocean. That's going to be very important for that space shuttle launch. And it's going to enter a new chapter for us. This new chapter is going to be called the Space Shuttle Program. And it's going to be something that was going to define us for many years after that, many other shuttle programs. And it's going to be something that I'm going to watch and grow up with, the Space Shuttle Program, seeing all these beautiful shuttles launch and bringing us to the moon. We have 6 successful moon landings during this program. We also have 12 astronauts. They're going to walk on the moon. We're going to have a couple disasters along the way. Like I said, we're going to learn from it. We're going to keep going forward. We're going to try to make sure that we are able to discover the next frontier, which is space. The shuttle program is going to end in 2011, and many people are going to wonder, well, what now? What are we going to do now? What does the space shuttle mean for us? It's going to change a little bit. What it's going to change into is commercial companies. I'm sure you've all heard of SpaceX, Blue Origin, United Launch Alliance, that's ULA. They're going to start to use Cape Canaveral, the Kennedy Space Center, and they're going to start to use it as their launch sites. In fact, they're going to use it for a pretty cool reason. SpaceX is going to start to take a rocket with the main goal of being able to take that same rocket, launch it, and then land it. This is big, y'all. So the space shuttle, remember I'm telling you, we're littering, we're polluting the whole time. We're launching things into the air, we're dumping things onto the ground, we're hopefully grabbing it later. SpaceX's goal is for us to keep all those. Those are expensive, right? We don't want to keep spending money on things that we can possibly bring back. I can tell you many times that I was on the beach with my mom and we looked over and they were testing some rocket again. It was adorable to start with. SpaceX would launch it, would waver in the air, crash back down in a fiery bomb. It took a long time, but now those rockets can launch and land back on their own. That's pretty cool, right? That's the future of the space industry. We're able to actually have these money spent on something that we're able to keep again. We just maybe got to clean it a little bit, right? Not become complacent. The local community is going to come together for this. Again, they're going to be part of STEM programs. They're going to encourage people to come out. I can tell you, when growing up, it was pushed on me a lot. Math, science, physics. I went to AP Physics. Loved it, had a great time in it. Clearly, history is more the way it can go than math. But I always look to the future of space. There are plenty of people out there that are willing to go to space that have a very much intelligent brain than I do, and I am happy to encourage them to go. And then maybe later, when I can retire up there and get an apartment on the moon. That sounds fantastic. I'm excited. It's going to bring a lot of curiosity, and it's going to continue. It's going to bring that continuity, that be able to keep the generational progress going. It's going to keep that encouragement of look towards the sky. Okay, look towards the sky. Look up to space. We can get up there. We can get up to the moon. We know that we can accomplish what we want to accomplish, and that's what's going to come about with the space industry. Okay, so today, what is going on with the space industry? Well, let me tell you. Artemis 2 launched on April 1st. Pretty cool stuff. Artemis 2 actually had a couple delays. So she was supposed to launch in January to begin with, and February, and then got pushed all the way back to April, which is fine. I'd rather you push back the launch than have, something bad happen to them, right? Let's keep it launching. Even towards the countdown, they delayed it for 10 minutes because of a communication issue. It wasn't a panel issue or a heat issue or a chill issue or whatever. It was truly a communication issue, and at the end of the day, we want to be able to communicate with our astronauts, right? So yeah, I'm happy that we stopped it for another 10 minutes, but they launched. They're gone, they're in space now. They're in space. Reese Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Cook, and Jeremy Hansen. The first woman who is going to be able to orbit space, who's going to be going to deep space, is on that shuttle right now. That's pretty cool, right? It's a 10-day mission, and their goal is to see how we can eventually land on the moon in 2027. I think that's pretty cool, and I'm excited for us to land on the moon. I'm excited to clap when they come back. I'm excited to watch their re-entry. I'm going to be super nervous. I'm probably going to cry, so good thing I'm not going to be on this cruise. But it's going to be wonderful, and I hope you're able to watch it as well. And I hope you keep your eyes tuned to SpaceX, to NASA, Kennedy Space Center. They all announce when their launches are, even if it's just a simple rocket with a satellite. These are cool things happening in the world. This is showing our power, our connectivity. The Americans made it to the moon first. We proved it. We also proved that we were able to take a space program and continue it. We're going to move forward with it, and our might is going to show as we continue on in 2027 and 2028, and then eventually when I have my apartment on the moon, you all can join me. It's fine. I would love for you to join me. So if I leave you with anything tonight, I just want to leave you with the beauty and the glory of what we have been able to accomplish as a country in really a short amount of time. We took a declaration in the 1960s and we met it. We got to the moon. Maybe we paused for a little bit, maybe there were some disasters along the way, but then we took that information and we made it better. We're going to remember all of those astronauts along the way, right? We're going to remember all of them. And we're going to thank them for bringing us a little step forward in the future. I have the video that my husband took of the space launch, if anyone is interested.
Yes.
This time I think I actually have it. The problem is going to be how I get it over the screen. Hold on. Oh my gosh.
Do you have to exit your PowerPoint first?
Well, I don't know. It's right there. I just can't get it over the screen. Yeah, I don't think so. The rainbow. Alright. Well, I figured this out. It's probably as simple as I needed to bring my mouse down here. Alright, well, it's obviously not going to happen. So, I will figure that out again. My next thing is to talk to you all about Green Cove Springs. But I really want to show you this video. Alright, well, I won't hold you up anymore. So Green Cove Springs. Green Cove Springs is where we're going to stop next. It's a small town along the St. Johns River. So we're actually going to go back where we kind of came a little bit. And then we're going to go in a little bit further down south into the St. Johns River in order to get to Green Cove Springs, which is known for its natural spring. It's named after the actual natural spring that's there and the river lake that's there. But let's go back up a little bit more, like I like to do, and talk a little bit about the early time period before highways and interstates that were around and how Florida was actually a little bit more difficult to travel through. And so much of the land in Green Cove Springs is going to be very swampy, it's going to be heavily forested, and it's going to be very undeveloped. You're going to see this kind of throughout most of Florida, especially early on in the developmental area. There's going to be steamboats that are going to travel up and down the St. Johns River, and in fact, there's a lot of boats that travel up and down the St. Johns River. It can go down to the Sanford area and go up to Jacksonville. It's a pretty interesting river. I know the river from growing up pretty close to the Sanford area, and you can see a lot of different things along it, right? So goods can be unloaded, you can see different atmospheres as you go through it. It's not going to be that same marshy swamp area that you're used to, but it is going to be, it's Florida, so it's still marshy and swampy in some areas. I can't escape that, no matter how much that you want to escape it. And you're going to see a lot of different types of ships that are going to ride on it, including steamboats. Steamboats are really interesting in the world of shipbuilding. So early on, you had ships that were being built, and they were built to understand the wind, right? And then you're going to have boats that are going to come about, and they're going to use steam. They're going to use different types of propulsion. When I worked for the C&O Canal, the main engines of the canal are mules. You tie up a mule to your boat, pull the boat through the lock, pull through the canal, and you keep going 4.5 miles. Do not mess up that 0.5 along the way, right? And then eventually, you're going to get to different forms of gasoline. One of the first ones that is used is basically oh my gosh, I apologize, I am blanking on this. It's basically the alcohol that you light on fire in order to create some sort of, it's not kerosene, close. But it's something along those lines. That would be very flammable to use. But it is pretty flammable, what they use early on before they discover that they can actually protect themselves a little bit more. You're going to see hotels and boarding houses along the way. So one of the interesting things that you'll find, especially along a river or along a area that has a lot of sailors or ports, is these little communities that are built in order to provide for those sailors. When I was getting my captain's license, I actually stayed in a place in Fort Lauderdale. It was just, for lack of a better term, a bunkhouse, where you could rent a room for a couple days. It was supposed to be for those sailors that come into port for a couple days. Why would you have an apartment? You can just rent a place. Why rent a fancy hotel when all you need is a bed and a shower? And so in a similar fashion, right, you should do the same thing when you're getting your captain's license and live like a sailor, right? So that's what I did. You'll see those along Green Cove Springs as well. This is also where the Navy is going to store ships that were no longer active. And so you're going to see a vibrant, fun shipping community of ships that are slowly but surely being destroyed through time. Some of these ships are going to be used for museum purposes. Some of these ships later can be scrapped. Some of these ships, you'll know from probably researching different areas, they can be used as reefs or they can be used for blockades, depending on what we're trying to do with them. So sometimes it's nice to keep an old ship around for a period of time. So why does a lot of this matter today, right? That's because Green Cove Springs itself is going to be one of those areas where you can go for general health. So they have that springs there. The spring is going to be a constant 76 degrees temperature, which is very nice if you're trying to cool down, if you're trying to be part of a healthy atmosphere. You can go there and know, kind of just like a cave system, you're always going to get the same temperature as you go. There's a lot of springs throughout Florida. I encourage you to go to the springs. If you're able to float some of the springs, it's really nice to see. You've got to just be on top of the water. You don't necessarily have to be in it. I personally don't like seaweed, so I don't know. And you can get boats that have bottoms on them, or little floaties. You also can go and see a lot of different wildlife up and down the coast. Yesterday we talked a lot about those different wildlife. We talked about what it could be like in order for you to see something or see what it is to be a healthy coastline. That's what's important, right? How can you look out and tell that something is actually healthy? Where you're seeing marine animals, right? You're seeing birds. The migration patterns are still happening. You're still seeing islands. You're still seeing people around you, right? The barrier islands are still blocking that major wind and those hurricanes when they come in. And so you're still seeing nature do what nature needs to do. And you'll still see it as you go to Green Cove Springs. There's a couple things that I recommend that you do there. There's the Chic Shack sandwiches when you go there. If you want to go in Spring Park Coffee. I think a lot of you are going to end up going on a long tour to the Kennedy Space Center. And I think that that's great. You should go. And since I couldn't show you this video here, next time I'll bring my mouse, I guess. We were halfway there today. I will show it to you. Feel free to stop by and I'll play it on my computer right here for you. But when you're there, walk around Green Cove Springs, be part of it if you're able to be part of it. And we'll talk a little bit more about the natural area and the history of it at my next talk. But the other thing you should do is walk along the St. Johns River. So I've talked a lot about barrier islands. Barrier islands are on the Atlantic side. We're in the river. We're going to be in the river now. So we're going to be very protected. We're going to be on the other side of the coastline. We're going to be interior. And so walking along the St. Johns River is going to show you a little bit more of that atmosphere of Green Cove Springs and a little bit more of an interior look as opposed to what you've seen as the coastlines of the, like I said, all of us Floridians Green Cove Springs has to offer you. All right, do you all have any questions? Ma'am.
I put that in George Carlin's at the Space Center, all behind the stars. And it's to get everything that look different than what they show visitors to see. What are a couple things that you think we should look for, and especially with
So the question was, if you're taking the VIP tour at the Kennedy Space Center, what should you look for? So my understanding of a VIP tour of the Kennedy Space Center is you're going to go behind some of those closed doors. You may actually be able to get a lot closer to a space shuttle. I don't know what shuttle is there. I know in Virginia, where I used to live in Chantilly at the Air and Space Museum, they have Shuttle Discovery. I can't remember what shuttle they have at the Kennedy Space Center right now. They may have an older Apollo there. I absolutely would ask to go inside the shuttle. Yeah, if I could, I would go inside the shuttle for sure. Or in any of their rockets. Ask if they have a SpaceX rocket there that you can see, because the difference between a SpaceX rocket and a shuttle is worlds difference. I mean, they're two totally different structures. SpaceX likes to launch a lot of rockets into the air right now that are satellites. And so if there's a rocket launch and sometimes what happens is the rocket launches and it disperses like 50 satellites at once, so it looks just like this bright beam of craziness. I would love to know what did that rocket look like compared to another rocket that only had, one satellite on it or had a completely different mission on it. There should be some astronauts there, hopefully, or some people who worked in the astronaut program, which in the control center, which is pretty cool to be in that control center. I mean, imagine the emotions. You have to wait. In the movies, it seems like it's quick back and forth, but it's not that quick all the time when they're talking back and forth. When you're looking up into space, you're looking into the past. You're looking into 8 minutes in the past, right? Because that's how long it takes light to reach you. So you're constantly looking and discovering new things. So I would ask them about their telescopes as well, what telescopes they have there, because that's the big thing now is how far can those telescopes reach? Because the farther they can reach, the more we discover about the Big Bang, the more we discover about our origins on Earth and how we came about, and the more we discover what other planets are around us. Those are all the things that I would do for sure. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else? Thank you all for listening to me on this journey. I'm very happy I could talk to you about the space shuttle. And again, if you want to see the video, I apologize again for not being able to figure it out, but